Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's a review for Attached, which is episode 8 of season 7 of Star Trek The Next Generation. And this video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation one episode at a time. And in this video I cover the 7th season episode Attached. So Attached is the episode in which Dr. Crusher and Captain Picard beam down to a planet to try to open negotiations with a faction of the planet that wants to join the Federation. However, they are taken prisoner by another faction who is paranoid and thinks that Picard is there to sell weapons to the other side. So the Kess, who are working with the Enterprise, work with Riker to try to rescue Picard and Crusher. However, when Picard and Crusher don't make the rendezvous point that the Kess were expecting them to make, he becomes very paranoid and starts blaming Riker and thinking that Riker is working with his enemy. And so Riker soon discovers that both species have a extreme heightened paranoia, and so he beams them up against their will, forces them to negotiate, and when the Prit are very concerned about a military alliance with the Kess and the Federation, Riker assures them that there will be no alliance and that they will reject the Kess's claim to the Federation, and that if she doesn't give up Picard and Beverly, a lot of starships going to show up and bother the hell out of them. So a deal is made and they rescue Picard and Beverly. In the meantime, while they were on the planet, Picard and Beverly had these implants put on them that telepathically linked them, where they could hear each other's thoughts. And Beverly soon learns that Captain Picard was in love with her, and they express these feelings towards the end of the episode, but then decide not to act on them. So I both like and hate what they do with Picard and Crusher in this episode, because I think the Beverly and Jean-Luc romance was a good idea. They started doing it in season 1 and then abandoned it when she left the show. They kind of toyed with it a little bit in season 3, but then never really got back to it. They pretty much abandoned it for the bulk of the show. So I like that they got more into it and explored it more and got them to admit their feelings. I don't like that they simply abandoned it at the end of the episode and just forget about it again. They agree not to express their feelings. That seemed really contrived, and there seemed no reason to it. Like, it seemed to go against what this episode was establishing. Further, in the past, has been pretty clear that Beverly was the one who had a crush on Picard, whereas in this episode they flip it so that Picard is the one who has a crush on Beverly, and that Beverly is the one who rejects Picard. Now, Beverly was always iffy in getting a relationship with Picard, as was seen in the episode Allegiance, when she thought she was dealing with the real Picard, but apparently it was just a clone that was toying with her. But she even then was hesitant to get in a relationship with him, so that is consistent. But it doesn't make all that much sense that she would reject him at the end of the episode. She doesn't even give any good reason. Like, they kiss and then she leaves and they both look regretful, and then it's never brought up again until this alternate future in All Good Things, where apparently the two of them got married and then divorced within the span of 25 years. And then flash forward to the actual canon that we get in the actual future in the show Picard. Apparently the two of them hooked up sometime after the events of the movie Nemesis. A couple had a child, which Beverly took and never told Jean-Luc about and hid, and then never talked to him for 25 years, and then reconnected when, 30 or so years later, when Jean-Luc meets his son that he never knew existed. So in other words, I think they did Jean-Luc and Beverly dirty. There was a phrase I was thinking of when I was watching this episode. It's shit or get off the pot. Have them hook up or don't have them hook up. I almost feel like it would have been better if they just didn't have this episode and they just went ignoring it and they didn't have them be married and all good things in the alternate future. And but if they didn't do that, then it would seem out of place for Picard season 3 to say that they had a kid together. You kind of buy that in Picard season 3 because of this episode and mainly the alternate future and all good things, which the show Picard does somewhat resemble. There are some similarities and some differences with that alternate future. So, yeah, but I feel like they never really committed to it. And this episode is a prime example of that because Beverly and Jean-Luc have very good interactions. They have good chemistry with each other in this episode. Their interactions when they can sense each other's thoughts and how they're finishing their sentence, and how Beverly, it's revealed that she always has a smart ass comment on the lips but has learned to repress it, and tells the childhood story about how she really hurt someone when she thought she was just being clever, and Picard could sense that and understand it. This was all very good interactions, and you really got sort of the mix of it. And Picard's confession about that he was in love with his best friend's wife, and so he felt extremely guilty even after he died. He didn't want to reveal this to her because he thought he would be betraying his memory. Again, that kind of retcons, I think, how they portray their relationship in earlier seasons. Or maybe not. Maybe you could input this information into it and say that that's why Picard was kind of always a bit standoffish with Beverly in her advances. But I don't know. The whole thing with Beverly saying, "Why didn't you ever tell me you were in love with me?" First of all, seems a bit soap opera. Second of all, come on. You didn't know this, Beverly? I think you did. But anyway, I don't know. And I just having it be this backstory of when Jack was still alive, I think it would have worked better to me if instead of there being this backstory about, I was guilty because I was in love with my best friend's wife, I think they should have just ignored the whole Jack Crusher thing and have it be something else that developed. And that the chemistry, the feelings that Beverly would sense for him would come from their natural connection, their chemistry, and that reading each other's thoughts and being telepathic with each other is what brings out those emotions and brings them closer together. I personally think that would have worked better, just my humble opinion. But I didn't totally dislike it, to be fair. I didn't think it was terrible that they revealed it this way. It's fine. It's just not what I would have personally preferred. And then they didn't really do anything with it. I always look back in this episode and think of it as the Picard and Beverly romance, but there's not really much of a romance here. They're just mostly trying to escape. And then sometimes they have these idle conversations, which again, I think is good. It's good chemistry. But then the moment that they actually reveal, why did you tell me you were in love with me? That scene ends pretty shortly after, and Picard goes to sleep. And then when they wake up the next day, they're focused on trying to escape again. And so there's so little of the actual romance, and we get, of course, another bookend at the end of the episode where they kiss a couple times, and Picard suggests, maybe we should explore our feelings for each other, and Beverly's like, no, I don't think we should, and it ends with them looking regretful. So in other words, shit or get off the pot. They didn't commit to it. If you're gonna fucking do a Picard and Beverly romance, do a Picard and Beverly romance. If you're not going to do a Picard and Beverly romance, then don't do a Picard and Beverly romance. This episode is kind of half-assed. Now, for the longest time, I appreciated that because half-assed is better than nothing. But I'm starting to reconsider that position that maybe nothing would have been better. Maybe, but I think obviously the real answer is committing to it would have been the best case scenario. And apparently, here's a story that's as old as time that I feel like I tell this story over and over again when it comes to Star Trek episodes. Apparently, the writers wanted to do it. They wanted to put Picard and Beverly in a committed relationship. Guess who said no? Rick Berman. Now, to be fair, apparently Michael Piller also said no, and he was very much against it. I usually agree with Michael Piller, but not always. But this is so. Maybe I shouldn't make Rick Berman the villain. Maybe it was Michael Piller more than Berman, but I think it was Berman. They say it was the studio, so Berman was definitely involved in this. And the reason that they stated for rejecting the romance was because they wanted to leave Picard open to have a fling in the movies. Yeah, how did that work out? We got fucking Insurrection, which was a stupid romance of the week that nobody gave a shit about. Yeah, that was totally worth it. There was no romance in Generations, First Contact, or Nemesis, but yeah, Insurrection, yeah, totally worth it. Like, wouldn't it have been better if the movies played up the romance between Beverly and Picard, just like they played up the romance between Riker and Troy and Nemesis and Insurrection? Wouldn't that have been better? I think not only would I say yes, I would wager, I would bet you anything that a vast majority of Star Trek fans would also say yes. Judging by opinions I've heard on this episode, I think that most certainly is the case. And just in general, not just this episode, but in general of people who were shipping, Beverly and Picard, like they should have just committed. Why even do this episode if you're not going to commit to it? That's what I'm saying. Now, outside of this episode, or outside of the romance aspect of it, it's just a generic Star Trek episode. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think Riker's really good in his scenes. There are actually several episodes in season 7 that really explore Riker's command style, which I do appreciate. He has they show him as having a very distinct command style that's different than Picard's, but still really good, that we see several times in season 7. We see it in this episode, we see it a little bit of it in Gambit, but we see it more in the Firstborn, where Picard's like off on some holiday or something, and parallels in the parallel universe when Riker's the captain. So we have several, so season 7 has several examples of really letting Riker's command style shine. This is one of them. And I think I love the scenes with him at the end where he tells off the Kesprit. Here's one thing about the name of the species, Kesprit. Sounds like desperate, and I think that's not a coincidence. I think they did that on purpose. And plus, it's weird calling that one group the Kes, because that's the name of the character on Voyager. But anyway, so yeah, I love the way he handles them at the end. When that guy starts getting all paranoid, he's like, "Perhaps I should leave the Enterprise," and he's like, "Fine, take all that junk with you." That was awesome. And when towards the end, where he goes to the Brits, like, "You're making an alliance," it's like, "I can assure you we are going to reject their application to the Federation." He lays it out and he's quite reasonable. It's like this group is divided, they haven't overcome their divisions, and they're overwhelmed with paranoia and a suspicion. That was great when he just fed the riot act. And that whole thing where like, oh, if you don't let our people go, there's going to be people calling you all the time. I feel like there was another episode that did that too. Maybe it was a different show. I don't remember, but it seems familiar. Anyway, so yeah, his command style was kind of cool. But the whole plot about the dude like getting paranoid and having like all those toys all over the room, like the weird devices, I feel like it was done for humor. Like the way they made the guy so like over, like a caricature of over the top suspiciousness is, I don't know if that's a word, but who cares, of being suspicious, of suspicion is probably the better way, the proper way to say it. But he was a caricature, and it was a bit too goofy at times. I mean, part of it I thought, oh yeah, this is fun or whatever, but other parts I'm like, yeah, this is too much. This is a little bit too much. And yeah, the overall story about Picard and Beverly trying to escape and then can't find them was very generic. I didn't really give a shit about it. The only reason why I was invested in this episode was the interactions between Beverly and Picard and the, seeing Riker's command style. Other than that, like, it was just generic, make a generic face. The plot. Generic face, the plot. It's just, yeah, these aliens are overly suspicious, and look how goofy they are. They bring all these wacky toys in the room, and they're talking hush voice like they're being like the caricatures. And then he's over the top ridiculous. I know you're working with the Prit. And I'm like, ooh, boring. And plus, the whole fact that if Beverly and Picard just stayed where they were, the Prit would have read their minds and saw that they were telling the truth, and maybe the whole thing would have been over and they wouldn't need all this bullshit. Now, maybe, or judging of how paranoid and delusional the Prit are, I would actually bet that's actually not the case. That the Prit wouldn't believe what their own technology is telling you, faked this somehow, and they'd be super suspicious and never let them go. So, I don't know. I think maybe that's not the case. Maybe if they stayed put, they wouldn't have been free. But then again, we had this fake stakes thing at the end of the episode where Beverly makes a little hole in the force field and then shoves Picard through it when he's not paying attention, and then Beverly's stuck on one side and Picard's stuck on the other side. I'm like, oh my god, they're separated, and we know they can't separate because they can't walk too far apart without freaking out. I'm like, oh no, how are we gonna get out of this? And like 2 seconds later, Riker had already made a deal with them. They just call them. They're like, yeah, just give the Enterprise their coordinates and beam up. So what's the fucking point? What was the point of that having one be on one force? Like, that tension, that stakes lasted for all of 2 seconds before it was deflated, like completely pointless. So why even bother, I ask. Anyway, yeah, so I'm not sure I really have much else to say about this episode. Yeah, getting some of the interactions between Crusher and Picard were good. Like that. Oh, one thing I will talk about is Beverly's gossip at the start of the episode about Alyssa Ogawa. This is actually, I was a bit confused because I think I watched the episode Lower Decks not that long ago, or saw something about it. So I thought that they had already mentioned Alyssa's boyfriend, but then I realized like Lower Decks hasn't happened. That's later in the season. So I think this is actually the first mention of Alyssa's boyfriend. And I was like, oh, she's off having sex instead of showing up to her shift on time or whatever. Barely the goss, doing the gossip. And yeah, so I think this is the introduction to it. We never actually meet him. He's kind of like Norm's wife just mentioned and never seen, but he's mentioned again in Lower Decks, where Beverly thinks that he's having cheating on her, but it turns out the two of them are going to get married. And then later she gets, I think it's the episode Genesis, she reveals she's pregnant. I think it was a Lower Decks, she also revealed they were getting married, and then she gets pregnant in Genesis, and she loses her baby in the alternate future of All Good Things, which presumably is undone. But yeah, we see her in the movies, but we never really, she's just a background character, so we never know what happened to her child or whatever, or her marriage. But anyway, it's just something I noticed that began here in this episode. So I would now like to thank all those that support me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does help me continue with the channel. And everyone's support is very much appreciated, especially that of Brandon Neilhouse and Antarius. Thank you both so very, very much for your strong support. I would also like to give a shout out to Benjamin Mead, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Valls, Alessandro Migalisio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So we do have a few patron comments on this episode. First comment is from Kyrie091, who says, "Attached, more like booty crap." I feel like booby trap equals booty crap is my best work on here. It's basically the equivalent of Vic Fontaine teaching Rom how to sing "That Lady is a Tramp." Anywho, this episode's title is a bit of a misnomer. You see, the word attached generally refers to connection, of joining of things, and I feel absolutely no connection to this episode, such that I forget it existed. I looked at the plot summary on Wikipedia and still found nothing in my memory banks. I was shocked to learn of an alien species called Kess, and I hope this episode is a bunch of Jennifer Leans just walking around. If it's anything else, then this episode is pure booty crap. I think you've had other ones better than booty crap, but I don't remember them off the top of my head because booty crap is the one that you keep bringing up over and over again. But I'm sure you had ones that at the very least were just as good. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, "Riker really shines in this episode. The Kess give a map to Beverly, but forget to tell them they have people waiting for them. Instead of Star Trek's dumbest criminals, they are Star Trek's dumbest allies. I'm so glad Picard and Beverly never got together in the real TNG. Thank you, Terry Metalis, for fucking that up, as they are better as real close friends, unless he thought All Good Things was a real episode and not a 66% science fiction episode by Q." See, I can be positive about Riker. I know I love to go on many rants about him from time to time. However, in a few episodes' time, it will be a massive rant. It's Picard's day and not Riker's day. Hint, hint. So my rating is 6. Never trust a race called the Kess unless it's Jennifer Lean out of 10. Yeah, you keep hinting at you're going to do a huge rant on the Pegasus, so kind of curious to what that rant's going to be, but I'll find out in good time. I'm not sure I agree with you that Q 66% was fiction by Q, because a lot of it has come true, like Picard working in the orchard, Geordi having 2 daughters named Sydney and whatever the other one's name was, and the Romulans having their empire destroyed. It played differently than it did in All Good Things, but it still happened. So, yeah, I don't know. I actually think that the Beverly and Picard romance, I disagree. They should only be good friends. I think they should have put them together, but as I said, shit or get off the pot. This half-assedness is a complete waste of time. And just having in actual canon, the whole romance takes place off screen and we just see the end results of their son. So that's kind of shit. Like, they should have put them together. They should have. Anyway. Next comment is from Antarius, who says, when I was younger, I was very much in favor of Picard-Crusher relationship. On one side, it's good that they finally picked up this long-lost storyline from the first season. On the other side, what they did with it is so unsatisfyingly, specifically the weak ending with the lame excuse why they chose not to proceed with the relationship. Riker is great in this episode. His line, "and make sure to take all this junk with you," is hilarious. I always liked location shooting, but for budget reasons they go to places like Bronson Canyon, Vasquez Rocks. I would love to see scenes filmed, for example, in Vancouver instead. They were very lucky nobody saw or seen for fire sued for this fire they started one day even without scanning technology that seems unrealistic. My rating is, or was it scan? Sorry, not sued. Scan for the fire that they started. You're talking about Picard and Beverly sitting by a fire, and while these people were looking for them, so they could have scanned for the fire and saw them. Very good point. Anyway, my rating is a strong 7 out of 10. Yeah, there's no way that they would have filmed in Vancouver. Like, that's way too expensive. Unless they filmed the whole show in Vancouver, which they weren't. They were filming in Los Angeles. Funny thing, if you ever watch X-Files, because I binge watched the show once, and I would not recommend it. It's not good for binge watching. I would, if I ever watched that show ever again or recommended watching that show, I would tell people to skip like 70% of the episodes. But anyway, the point is, in the first 5 seasons, it was filmed in Vancouver, and then in the next 4 seasons, it was filmed in Los Angeles, and you can tell. First of all, like, when they were filming in Vancouver, you see all these actors who were in Stargate SG-1 and some other stuff that was filmed in Vancouver, so Vancouver actors. And then in the later seasons when they film in LA, you see more Hollywood actors I see in Star Trek, and other actors that I know from other shows. But more importantly, in the first half of the X-Files, when they were filming in Vancouver, every single episode they went in the woods. They were always in the Northwest. They was always in Oregon or Washington in the storyline. Obviously, they actually filmed in Vancouver, and that's why. And they would go to other places that were woods-like in America, and then when they moved filming to Los Angeles, all of a sudden they went to the desert all the time. They were going to Nevada and New Mexico and Southern California. So, yeah. Anyway, has nothing to do with Star Trek. But the point is, yeah, they're not going to... Star Trek's way too cheap. Like the last episode, they couldn't even go on location. They just dressed up. They couldn't even go to a fucking house. They just dressed up the quarters and said, "Oh, this is the house you grew up in." And they just, like, doubled the R.A. Enum for an actual lake. And were like, "Oh, we'll just say it's a dream thing." Cheap. They are cheap. Anyway, I mean, they were a very popular show in season 7. Like, they were at the height of the popularity. They were nominated for an Emmy. Surely they could afford some fucking location shoots. Anyway, sorry. Rant over. Well, to be fair, they did location shoots in this episode, but there's no way they're going to Vancouver. Anyway, sorry. Next comment is from Ricky, who says, "I like this episode, but it really lacks any follow-up until we get to Picard Season 3, which was a very big disappointment. They should have been an official couple like Odo and Kira became in the last 2 seasons of the show. I really like the scenes between Picard and Crusher. I can feel the chemistry between them, and honestly, they would have been one of the best couples in the franchise. To me, this is a huge missed opportunity, and it brings this episode down for me, so my rating is a 6 out of 10. Now, I totally agree. They had good chemistry. They would have made a great couple, which is part of the reason why this episode is so goddamn frustrating. And to be honest, like, I think they should have put them back together in season 3. Like, when Beverly came back to the show and they did that teasing their romance with the Legions, put them back together then. Have them be a couple for the bulk of the show. I think Beverly would have been a way more interesting character, sorry to say. But at the very least, it would have been like a power couple, like one of the best in Star Trek. But instead, it all happens off screen. Bullshit. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neal Howells, who says, is anyone else reminded of the Mark of Gideon, or is it just me? There are shades of A Taste of Armageddon here when neither side has communicated with the other for more than a century. And the truth is out. Picard has loved Beverly for years. Damn, I don't have the words to express my astonishment. Kesprit, that spitting noise of disgust you make when an episode shows a lot of promise but fails to deliver. I'm glad no one can hear my thoughts about this one. I hate both races on the planet and the Federation for being a bunch of smug, monoculture-loving prits. 3 breakfasts of coffee and croissants out of 10. Yeah, so it's hard to know what tone you were intending when it's just text, but I kind of imagine that when you said that line, damn, I don't know, I have words to express my astonishment, the tone would be something along the lines of, damn, I don't have words to express my astonishment. Like, that's how I would read it. That's how you're getting it across. But yeah, so it's a good point about the Kesprits. Why doesn't the Federation do any research? Like, this isn't the only time it happens. It happens a lot where they'll go to investigate a species or meet with them for possible members of the Federation, and there would be like blaring like red flags. Like, why does no one pick up on this before they send the fucking Enterprise? Like for this, I mean, if it's something like minor, then maybe I could see going overlooked. Like in the episode The Hunted, like they didn't know about the fact that they were, that they did this genetic engineering, which apparently the Federation really hates, and they were forcing these veterans in prison because they were scared of them or whatever. Like, it seems like they should have known that, but then something like that I can kind of see going overlooked. But this, like, where these guys are obviously like paranoid, delusional dicks, how could you? What kind of incompetent fucking moron? I bet you it was the Cerritos. I bet you the Cerritos was in charge of the second contact. I know this is probably the days, but this is pre-Cerritos. I think Cerritos wasn't really around, at least not in its current form, during this time. But I bet you it would. It was something like, it was those California class ships. They fucked up second contact. Anyway, last comment is from Norman Buchwald, who says, my frustration with this episode is they make the whole point creatively to bond Picard and Crusher together, and then at the end of the episode they do the reset button and have both decide they not pursue a relationship. At least with Janeway and Chakotay, there was enough stated at the end of their episode to more easily buy the dilemma, and that especially in episodes later Janeway was determined. But somehow Janeway and Chakotay's intimate friendship dinners always seemed genuine, while watching Picard and Crusher's breakfasts, which mostly predate this episode, reminds me a bit of frustration. Add to what happens in their future, all good things, have them married and then divorced, and have Beverly Crusher become a captain of her own medical ship, which was a good continuation of her potential in Descent Part 2. Instead, we end up having her in hiding from all the TNG characters, except maybe Wesley a little bit thanks to Prodigy, and coming across a rather strange character fans have a bit contempt with, as she had Picard's child from everybody, which only really makes sense due to plot. But I'm getting away from this episode with this rant. It's the ending of this episode and the peculiar way the Kess planet was being considered for the Federation with their obvious internal conflict that actually makes me place this episode on the skip list. Even though it's not that bad, it's just a crude tease to the PC shippers Picard and Crusher, not politically correct, just for clarification, for the PC shippers, even if it was not intended. Sure, it might have been nice if the effect was explored further, or they may have been admission in a private conversation with Riker that he had, and still seems to. I don't think it just happened in the first episode, where he and Troy had something like that. I don't know. Otherwise, it's at best average. 5 bonds out of 10. So another thing that was interesting is that they're trying to retcon and counter a Firepoint when Picard reveals he was in love with you, or in love with her, and she's like, oh, that's why you didn't want me to come on the Enterprise. He never really said that he didn't want her on the Enterprise. He thought that she wouldn't want to go on the Enterprise, that it would be that she would find it too difficult to work with him. But I suppose they're saying that that was just a pretense, that really he didn't want her to come on board and was trying to pretend like it was her wishes not to come on board. And when she said, I insist, I asked for this position, then he was like, oh, he lost his pretext. So you could say that. But I don't, because it's a retcon. I think that it's a retcon. It's not one of the worst retcons, to be fair. But you bring up Chakotay and Janeway's relationship. That is a very good comparison, because whatever that episode was called, I actually really liked that episode. I hated the concept of a Janeway-Chakotay romance, so I actually refused to watch that episode for the longest time. Like, this is fucking stupid. But when I actually sat down and watched it, I was like, this is actually really good. And then they came up with like the perfect reason. Like, it was a powerful ending. And you totally bought that these two why they would abandon their romance. In fact, when they went back and showed them acting as captain and first officer, it's like, very good, captain. Like, that was such a subtle, like, undercut ending that spoke volumes. It was beautiful. Like, I loved it. Here, on the other hand, they don't even give a reason of why Picard and Crusher don't pursue their relationship. They don't make it clear at all. And it's more of like, Picard's like, well, maybe we shouldn't be afraid to explore our feelings. And Crusher says, well, maybe we should. And that's it. That's it. Why? Why should you? They don't give any explanation. It is totally unclear, in contrast to the Chakotay and Janeway thing, which was crystal clear and absolutely beautiful. Now, I do disagree with you about the breakfasts, though. I think I do see chemistry in their breakfasts even before this episode. You could look at it as a friendship, but okay. So I wouldn't phrase it as chemistry, more of a closeness. You see a closeness in their breakfast scenes together, and I think that this episode builds off of that closeness and kind of turns it into something more romantic when they're telepathically linked. So in that regard, I think they do a good job in this episode. By the way, I was a bit disappointed they didn't bring Troy in and have Troy sort of comment on the fact and talk to her about, oh, this is what it feels like to read people's thoughts, or compare, or Troy to sort of sense the thing going on between Picard and Beverly and sort of have something and talk to them about what it was like, and maybe explain, well, maybe you're just feeling this way because you're sensing other people's thoughts, and it's a weird experience, and let me guide you through it. That's another missed opportunity, I think. Anyway, thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So my rating for Attached out of 10 is going to be a 6 good. So I don't think this is a bad episode. the Picard and Beverly chemistry works. It's interesting enough. The Riker's command style, seeing that really works, and seeing him say, take that junk with you, like it's great. But the main plot is just generic. It's kind of there, and the fact that they turn the aliens into over-the-top paranoia caricatures is just kind of goofy. I can't really... It just doesn't seem like there was enough here for an episode. Because either, again, shit or get off the pot. Either do a Picard and Beverly romance, or do go full in on exploring this strange culture. They kind of half-assed both storylines, really, if I'm being honest. And the result was not something that's, again, terrible. I wouldn't say it's a bad episode, because there's good aspects to it, good character interactions, good Riker moments, but it just doesn't cohese. So it's just kind of meh, really. Anyway, so that is it for my review of Attached. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like or comment. What did you think of this episode? Am I being unfair to it, or am I being very fair to it? Yeah, it helps me out in the algorithm. If you would really like to support my channel, you can support me on Patreon. There's a link in the description below. Different tiers for different budgets, different rewards, such as a Patreon-only series that I do of videos exclusive to Patreon, of where I revisit reviews that I've already made. Or you can maybe request a video for me to do, or do have access to pre-releases 2 weeks in advance, ad-free. Stuff like that. But if you can't, or simply don't want to support me on Patreon, that's fine too. Leaving a like, subscribing, all that other stuff helps me out a lot as well. So, let's see what's coming up next on my channel. Where are we at? So Monday will be my review for Rules of Acquisition. Wednesday will be my review for Force of Nature. Thursday I'll be covering Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5, Episode 5. And then on Saturday, I'll be over on Patreon doing one of those exclusive Patreon videos, revisiting my review for Necessary Evil. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Next Generation and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, one episode at a time. And be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.